Imagine, just for a moment, being born today, opening your eyes to the world, but with the absolute certainty that you're going to live for 2 entire centuries. Today, we're going to embark on a cinematic journey through an explainer of a hypothetical human life stretching across 200 years. Picture our protagonists. Let's call them our time traveler. They're going to watch entire generations grow up, see sprawling cities fundamentally transform, and witness technological leaps way beyond anything we can currently comprehend.
So, you have to ask, what if you really could live for 200 years? Well, let's dive into that, because living twice as long doesn't just mean you get twice as many birthdays with a slightly bigger cake. No, it profoundly alters the very fabric of human existence. It would completely redesign how we think about childhood, the entire arc of our careers, the depths of our relationships, the very structure of global society, and ultimately, our human perception of time itself. But to understand this future, we first need to look at the physical realities of the present.
Which brings us to part 1, the biology of aging, unlocking the cellular clock. Before we can follow our traveler into their second century, we have to ask a foundational question. Why don't humans normally live that long right now?
See, human aging isn't caused by one simple hidden switch that just suddenly gets flipped off. Our bodies slowly accumulate changes over a lifetime. It's kind of like wear and tear. Step 1, our cells just naturally accumulate damage through everyday living. Step 2, as we get older, our biological repair systems become less and less effective at actually fixing that damage. And step 3, eventually normal cell division simply halts, and many of our biological processes gradually become less efficient. Understanding this cellular clock is the absolute key to our biological future. But what if science actually solved enough of these problems to keep our protagonist completely healthy?
That takes us to part 2, redesigning youth and work, a life in chapters. Let's look at how our protagonist's timeline would fundamentally stretch out. Think about it. Today, childhood and education occupy a really small, rushed portion of a lifetime. But imagine knowing you literally have nearly 2 centuries ahead of you. Education could easily stretch from ages 0 to 40. You could actually take your time. Instead of agonizing over one major career choice at age 18, our protagonists could explore completely different fields. They could spend 40 years as a pioneering scientist, transition into a master musician for the next 40, become an engineer in their second century, and then just go right back to education. Life becomes this amazing series of rich, deeply explored chapters. You wouldn't need to rush to grow up at all.
Just consider the gravity of this staggering number for a second. 150. Imagine starting your first serious career at age 25, realizing you still have a century and a half left to work, create, and contribute. The whole concept of retirement at 65? It would completely vanish. Experience would become incredibly deep and immensely valuable, as you master a profession for literally decades before deciding to just start completely over.
But okay, there is a massive catch here. Longer lives force society to redesign its systems. Think about the economic friction that causes. If our 200-year-old protagonist, along with millions of their peers, hold on to senior leadership positions for 6 or 7 decades, how does a younger generation ever break in? It creates this massive generational bottleneck. Longer lives wouldn't automatically create a better society. They'd actually forced us to entirely dismantle and rebuild the way our economy and our workforce operate.
Now on to part 3, technological shockwaves. A series of different civilizations. The relentless pace of change our protagonist would have to endure is honestly almost unimaginable.
To really grasp the scale of this change, consider someone born back in 1826. They entered a world of early, primitive industrial technology. We're talking steam power and horses. If that exact same person lived 200 years to today, they would be surrounded by modern computing, artificial intelligence, and global instant communication. Now take that, and imagine our protagonist living through the next 200-year leap. They wouldn't just see a few cool new gadgets, they'd experience technologies that today's society literally cannot even conceptualize.
So the crucial point here is the psychological toll of this cycle. Our protagonist would have to learn entirely new methods of communication, watch them become completely obsolete, and then repeat that exhausting cycle again and again and again. Over a 200-year lifespan, the future wouldn't just feel like steady progress, it might actually feel like living through a succession of entirely different alien civilizations.
And this rapid change extends way beyond technology, right into the human heart. That's part 4, relationships and fading memories, the weight of 2 centuries. Let's look at the deeply personal toll of living this long.
Families could suddenly contain 6, 7, or even 8 generations all alive at the exact same time. Our protagonists could easily rock their great-great-great-grandchildren to sleep. But relationships would also become infinitely more complex. Lifelong friendships would literally span a century. Marriages and partnerships would carry vastly different expectations if "until death do us part" suddenly means 150 years. The very definition of starting over in your personal life would completely change as you navigate these distinct relationship chapters.
And then, we hit a really profound biological and psychological wall. How do you store 150 years of memories? Human memory already degrades and changes over a normal lifetime. Imagine being 180 years old and trying to recall your childhood home, trying to remember the face of your first best friend from over a century ago, or the vivid details of a historical event you lived through 140 years prior. Simply extending your lifespan does not mean your brain magically possesses the limitless capacity to remember every single moment perfectly.
As one researcher noted, a 200-year life could involve learning how to manage memories as much as learning how to create them. Our protagonist would have to constantly cope with the reality of their own fading personal history, learning to let go of the distant past simply to make room for the present.
Now, consider how all of this builds on a macro scale in Part 5, the societal shockwave, scaling the planet. If our single protagonist is experiencing this, what happens when billions of people are doing the exact same thing?
Look, if humans suddenly live twice as long and birth rates don't drastically plummet, global population growth becomes an immediate existential crisis. Every system we rely on right now, housing, the food supply, healthcare, jobs, retirement, it is all calibrated for an 80-year lifespan. If we stretch that to 200, these systems just break. Governments would be forced to completely rethink policies from the ground up, tackling immense systematic adaptation and policy rethinking on a planetary scale.
And perhaps the most critical societal hurdle of all is the wealth gap. If treatments to slow aging are incredibly expensive, they might only be available to the wealthiest individuals. This could create an enormous, unprecedented biological divide in society, where longevity itself becomes the ultimate marker of inequality. It's a profound systemic challenge that any society on the verge of a 200-year lifespan would have to address impartially and very carefully.
Which brings us to our final and honestly most important perspective. Part 6, Time, Health, and Beyond. Quality over quantity. Because hitting the 200-year mark doesn't mean anything if those years aren't actually worth living.
The true goal of science here isn't just about extending lifespan, it's about maximizing health span. Health span is the period of life spent in good health and functioning well, rather than just merely surviving. Imagine living to 200, but spending the last 90 years of it chronically ill, frail, and confined to a bed. That doesn't really solve anything, does it? The most interesting question for our protagonist's future isn't how long can humans survive? It is, unequivocally, how long can humans remain healthy?
It's been said that 200 years would give humans something we've never had before. Time on a completely different scale. Imagine our protagonist right now at the end of their incredible 2-century journey. They're elderly, yes, but vibrant. They've lived through 3 completely different careers. They've watched civilizations evolve, they've loved across 7 generations, and they've learned to gently let go of memories from a century past. They look up at the night sky, realizing that this immense amount of time has forced us to rethink absolutely everything about what it means to be human. But you know, looking up at those stars sparks one final, completely mind-bending thought. If our protagonist can live for 200 years, what happens when we combine that massive lifespan with traveling through the cosmos near the speed of light? Because for a traveler moving that fast, time itself bends. And that is where we're going next.